everybody. This is Liza Eintema back with season 2 of Raising the Bar with our second episode with Ann Kavanagh, who is the founder of Media Pros and a dear friend. Ann, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so thrilled with everything that you've accomplished in the past few years. It really is something.
Thank you. And to our viewers, I hired Ann very early on in the process of rolling out DDP because having done crisis communications myself, I realized that I needed a lot of help. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. And can you give us a little bit about your background? I know it's very varied and you've had an extraordinarily interesting group of clients and experiences. So can you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Well, I was a longtime reporter to start out with. I worked as a television news reporter for 28 years. Most of those years were here in Chicago, where I'm based now. And I also did magazine stories and print stories on the side just because I enjoyed writing. So I had a lot of experience. And then in 2010, I turned 50 and, it was a tsunami in the media world. Revenues were going down with digital media, and they were cutting back staff. And I felt like I had done everything I could accomplish. So I decided to start my own media consulting business, and I named it Media Pros 24/7. And my thought was that so often PR companies would pitch us stories or would represent organizations, and they really had no idea what reporters and newsrooms were looking for. So I thought maybe that was a void that we could fill. So everybody that worked for me and continues to work with me today has had at least 10 years as a reporter or a producer in a major news market. So they definitely know what's going on in the newsrooms, how to prepare people for interviews, and what reporters are looking for.
And I think that's super important, having pitched before on the other side, having been around the world of journalism a bit. Particularly these days, things don't just stop, and you can't just say, I don't want to talk about that, or we're done, and expect the media to go away. I mean, if something is a story, people are going to pursue it. And that leads into my first question, which is, talk to me a little bit about what media training looks like, particularly in the not-for-profit world. But really, I think we're talking about any business, a fairly small business up to a fairly large one, and things people don't know, some hints that people should be aware of.
Well, I think everybody needs media training, whether they're an experienced communicator. I think in many cases they may have great skills, but they need to be prepped for interviews, especially tough interviews, and novices, people who have never done it before. And they need to get those performance skills down, especially for TV, because it is important to be engaging. You're judged on your delivery, your demeanor. It's not just what you say, but it's how you say it. And of course, your appearance. And there are a lot of simple tips that aren't brain surgery, but they really make a lot of difference. They make a huge difference for people. So that's important. But the other thing, and I think it's even more important, is to work with people to develop a strategy, to not just go into an interview and think, I know my topic pretty well. I'll just, answer whatever questions they ask. No, you need to go into an interview with a strategy. You need to know what you want to accomplish with that interview, what you want the headline to be, what you want the main takeaway to be. And then you have to manage the interview. You have to come up with those concise, informative, and engaging quotes and sound bites that reporters are looking for and that really move the needle as far as what you're trying to accomplish. You need to anticipate the questions you'll be asked, the basic questions, of course, which are kind of easy to anticipate, but also where your weaknesses are. What are some negative questions that could come up? And you have to prepare responses for them. And then finally, you're going to have to be able to pivot away from questions that really don't go with what you want the headline of the story to be. You know what the message is that you want to communicate, and you want to stay on that message. So it's important to have the performance skills, not just for TV and radio, but also for print, because you don't want to ramble. You have to get that good quote, but you also need to be strategic.
Talk about the process that you took me through. I went home and took a 2-hour nap when we were done.
It is very hard on people, and you get tired, and you also get hungry. I often compare doing a live interview or even just any kind of interview basically to being an air traffic controller. You have to really be totally focused and really think and be on top of your game, and that takes a lot of energy. Um, a lot of times people don't think they need media training. So the first thing we do is we just go in and do a baseline interview, and I throw questions at you. And oftentimes people don't handle it very well because they haven't thought about the questions, especially where they're weak or where, or where there's some negativity, and they often don't think about it and they don't handle it very well. And then they realize, oh yeah, I really do need some media training. So and we do this all on camera, and it's not just for TV interviews but print interviews too, because I don't think you can really make change unless you actually see for yourself how you're coming across. So we do this on camera and we look at it, and it's kind of painful, but I try to do it with a sense of humor and in a very supportive manner. We're all there to help each other. I did work in front of the camera for 28 years. And honestly, when I started, I was not a natural. I made a lot of mistakes. So I can really relate to people on how difficult it can be and how intimidating it can be. So I think I look upon it as something really nurturing and empowering, because how great is it to bring out the best in people and allow people to be their very best so they can really achieve their goals. So we go into it with that mindset. Then once we get that first interview where everybody realizes, there are some things we need to work on, then I have a media training book with some very basic tips, but they seem to really make a difference for people. It's just kind of the little inside info that I learned the hard way on the job for 28 years. And then we get ready for a second interview, and we do prepare. We think about, what do I want this headline to be? What are the questions I could be asked? What are the negative questions? And how do I bridge back? What are some of those bridge phrases that I can use to bridge back to my main messaging so I can control my headline and not go in a different direction that doesn't really reach my strategic goal? So we do this a second time, and we focus on the sound bites or the quotes, and we also focus on cleaning up some of the body language issues, the demeanor issues. Oftentimes people they don't have enough energy on camera. TV can be very forgiving. You don't have to be perfect. I think people really think they need to be perfect, but you don't. You just have to be real and authentic. But we all have some nervous tics or, things that aren't so great that we're not even aware of. So seeing ourselves on camera, it's very easy to clean those things up once you're aware of them and to kind of boost that energy up. So we do a second round of interviews, and it's remarkable how much better people usually are the second time around. People really make a huge improvement. And then we do a third round of interviews where we practice different interview formats: taped versus live, live remote, news conference. So we give people a real idea of different things. Then we talk about the messaging and how to make it media friendly. And that pretty much wraps it up. It's usually 4 to 6 hours, and people, as Liza said, are very exhausted afterwards because it takes a lot out of you.
I used to do this for a living, not exactly what you did, but prep people for interviews. And I started my organization. I thought I had the messaging down, and boy, did I have a lot to learn. One of the points I guess I would make as well is that you had cued me on this. Don't go to somebody unless you really do have a story or something to say, and then keep a relationship going. You don't want to start a relationship in a crisis if you can help that. And then the one that I would absolutely, and I'd love to hear you talk about, is don't think you're going to outsmart these people, that they're not very bright. Just because somebody's bright and bubbly on camera doesn't mean they're not a complete professional and know what they're doing. Can you talk a little bit about coaching clients into, sort of not trying to outsmart somebody, or I don't need to talk to the media, and then all of a sudden they do?
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't think you should be afraid of the media. Don't think of the media as your enemy, but don't think of them as your friend either. Realize that they're professionals, and what they really want is a good story. And that's the bottom line. They want a good story. And you have to think about how you can make whatever your strategic goal is into a good story. And that's really what you did with DDP. And it was very successful. There had been a lot of anecdotal information about um, problems in the ballet regarding opportunities for women, but you brought data to it. So we really tried to push that with the media, like, okay, it's been talked about for years, but here's the actual data that we've gotten from the company. And it made a huge difference. And that's when I worked with you on your initial outreach and sound bites, we really stressed that because that was something new. And the media always likes new. So you really want to come up with a good story. And you did with DDP because you were, for the first time, bringing data to the anecdotal evidence of sexism in ballet and the lack of opportunities for women in the ballet once they got off the stage. So the media responded to that, but you were a new nonprofit in the beginning, and oftentimes they're not going to embrace you right off the bat, even if they are interested in what you're doing. And in your case, they were interested, but you really had to nurture a relationship with them, which you did. You identified key reporters who you thought were important, who you would love to do the story. And then you kept up with them when you got new data information. You would reach out to them and say, hey, here we are, blah, blah, blah. And it was an investment of time on your part, but it paid off in a big way because you did develop these relationships and you became the go-to person in the ballet world when it came to these issues. And you've gotten unbelievable media coverage, but more importantly, you are changing the ballet. And the media coverage is helping you to do that. And then obviously today with social media too, you can use these earned media stories to promote them on social media. So they live on and on and on. Before, and getting back to the media training, in the old days, there could be a great story for your organization. But if people didn't read it that day in the newspaper, or if they didn't watch it on the 10 o'clock news, they'd never see it. On the other hand, if you messed up and it wasn't your best interview or something, it went away as well. Today, nothing goes away. It all lives on in the internet. So that can work in your favor or it can hurt you. And DDP's found a way to make it work for you.
Yeah, although one of the things that we talked about over and over and over again, and when we do the team training, and by the way, everybody, my entire team gets trained, is don't be afraid to say you don't know. And also don't be, we really had to clarify and go over and over what it is DDP doesn't do. Can you talk a little bit about that?
No reporter will ever be upset with you if you say, that's a great question. And I haven't thought about that, but I'm going to look into that and get back to you. Or they ask you a question, you have the information, but you don't have it, off the top of your head. It's very fair and smart to say, I have some data on that. I don't have it off the top of my head, but let me get back to you on this and I'll bring it to you. So definitely, never exaggerate, never make facts up because it will come to bite you in the butt sometimes because they will follow up. They're not going to take everything you say as gospel. They're going to do their own research as well. So it's always good, again, to be real and authentic. And it's okay to say you don't know if you don't know. It actually gives you more credibility.
I think it gives you a ton more credibility. And I do run into reporters who don't want to go check 5 other sources. So I always say about Dance Data Project, we're the what, not the why. And they really want me to say, well, why do you think this is? Or what trends do you see? And it takes a lot of discipline that you taught me to say, that's not my job, but I can certainly give you 5 experts that you can talk to. So let's make up a company. I know you're working with a small one that both of us know, but let's talk about, you're a small dance company, or you're putting on a festival, and you may be thinking, I don't have the budget for this, or I don't really need this. I'm making great art. And let's run through some scenarios on why media training, not just for the artistic executive director, but for the team, why that's a really good idea.
You mean seek out media coverage?
Yeah, seek out media coverage, or just have your people trained so that so that they can be effective ambassadors for the organization. Because I think that's one of the key things that I realize, and why we constantly rehire you, is first of all, that everybody's saying the same thing. And second of all, that people feel confident going out to talk about Dance Data Project and what it is we do?
Well, you have to be able to tell your own story. And that sounds pretty basic, but it's actually a hard thing to do. And whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's the governor of a state, whether it's a major law firm, a major healthcare organization, I work with so many people across the board, really smart people who do know what they do, but it's very hard for them to communicate it in a succinct way when you have to make it impact quickly. So first of all, you have to be able to describe it in 30 seconds in a concise way, an informative way, and an engaging way so people want to learn more, especially if you want to make change like you did with DDP. You had a mission to make change. And it's especially important in fundraising because, as you know, people are approached with requests all the time, and you have to really get their attention quickly to make your point. And so it's very important to be able to do that. I also think it's important to let the larger community know what you're doing and why it's important and why they should care about it. And there could be people out there that don't really care about the ballet. They're sports guys or whatever, but they also know that it's important to a community, to a city, to have a thriving arts community. So they want to hear about it. It may not be their thing, but they know that it's an important thing. And so I think it's always good to engage the media when you're doing things. And a couple of things, especially with the ballet and especially with TV, local TV stations are always looking for art stories. They're always looking for things that are visual. They love that. And they have a lot of time to fill today. And they don't have the producing staffs and the reporting staffs that they had even 10 years ago. The budgets have been cut. So they have more people tasked with filling more airtime. So anything that's visual, they love. So they want to hear about this. So reach out to them, let them know. And 9 times out of 10, they'll probably cover it if it's something good. So that's something to think about. They're also, again, as we said, looking for stories. So if you have something special about the dance group, if it is a woman choreographer, or if you have a diverse group of dancers, or if they're doing a more modern version of the ballet or whatever, figure out what's newsworthy about your particular performance and let them know. And remember that they always like new. They always like different. So if you can come up with those angles, they often will cover it.
Yeah, I 100% right. I guess I have a couple of things to, in response to that. I used a lot of the techniques you taught me. We've gone, I think, to 26 different ballet companies, and I stay for 2 or 3 days. And what I'm trying to do is tease out what's different, what's interesting. And that, if you're in it every day, you may not realize we're doing a profile of the head of the director of facilities at Dallas Black Dance Theater. And she's the one who's up on the roof talking to the HVAC guys. I mean, she's in there with the plumbers and the screwdrivers and the lighting and, of course, the security systems and everything else. Fascinating woman. Nobody there had really thought about it because she's A, super competent, and B, she's always been there. And I think you're right. Somebody coming in and sort of getting people to talk about stories, things surface that are really valuable and really interesting. The other thing that occurs to me as you're saying this is it can't necessarily always be on your schedule. So again, going back to your 24/7 thing, sometimes, we scramble a lot, and you really reinforce this to me. If you want coverage, it may not be on your time deadline. And we had a couple of things I remember that you rehearsed me for where it got delayed. And then all of a sudden, with 3 hours to air, they want tape, they want facts and figures. And as you know, most of my staff has at least 2 other jobs. So it's also an effort on our part. And if you want press, it's an effort on your part to scramble, try and make it happen, get the best and the most accurate information you can, even if it's not scheduled in and even if it's not the most convenient thing in the world. Can you talk about that part of dealing with the media? Because you really reinforced that with me when I was starting out.
It's so funny that you're saying this now because I had to give a little pep talk to a client this morning, a nonprofit. And it's just what you're saying. We were able to get a huge story with a major newspaper, and it's really going to be life-changing for this nonprofit. It really is, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to, as you say, get the facts and figures, get the pictures, get the right interviews for them. It takes a lot of work, and it's like herding cats. And you have to, if you want media and you want to make that big difference or get that story that really is the foundation piece for your organization and moves the needle, you're going to have to be willing to do the work. And as you said, on their timetable. But the payoff is great. And the payoff is great. And again, as we said before, thanks to the internet, that payoff will continue for years and years to come for the organization. So it really is worth it. You have to look upon it as an investment, but you also have to know it takes work, and you have to do it when they're ready to do it.
Yeah, so a couple of things come out of that for me is number one, plan in advance, get your people trained in advance. You are going to be able to, I think, number one, identify what an opportunity is or something that could go the other way, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, things going wrong, and be trained, be prepared, be ready. The other thing is that I've had stories that I wanted to tell about Dance Data Project, or, very often I try and be a good ally. I'm saying, hey, you should look at this ballet company. You should look at this festival. This is a really exciting time. It's not necessarily always about me and about Dance Data Project. We are here to advocate for other people. So I try and gather stories and then push the media or push them towards the media. It may not happen that year. It may not happen, for 5 months, for a year and a half. But I think you do build up goodwill. There's a reciprocity. If I supply a reporter with something or a TV station and they can't use it right now, they usually remember and they will come back to me. It's just not necessarily on that story at that immediate timeline. So I think the preparation aspect and the don't expect immediate payoff. I've been
Well, I think what you want to do, and you're really saying this, is you want to become their go-to expert. And today they're under the gun. They have these ridiculous deadlines today. There aren't as many reporters or producers. It is a 24/7 news cycle. Plus they're feeding the beast of social media as well. So they really, they don't have time to seek out their own experts so much, as we did maybe 15, 20 years ago. So if you're helpful and you supply them with information, not only about your organization, but other things that could help, they will come back to you all the time because it's easy. Let's go to Liza and DDP. They're a great organization. They're super helpful. If she can't help us, she'll find somebody else who can. And you build up that relationship, and it just pays dividends for years to come.
But it means you have to be prepared. You can't be scared of the media. You have to understand exactly what you're willing to say and not say. And I still get pushed all the time to say, well, why do you think this is? And the answer is, that's not my job, but I'll introduce you to 5 super smart people who can talk about that. The other thing that always surprises me with some of these extremely smart people is, well, they didn't mention these 5 things I talked about in the interview, so it wasn't a good interview. And I was like, are you kidding me? It was a brilliant interview, lot of space, lot of ink, lot of light and sound. Talk a little bit about expectations for the media if you present a story hitting all your points, because they may not, right?
They may not. I mean, your goal is to get them to do it, but they may not. And, several things come into play there. Number one, the media loves breaking news. They love breaking news. So if there's something in the news that day that pertains to the ballet or the arts world, they're going to want your reaction to that. And you may not want to really react to that, but you probably are going to have to. So I always tell everybody, keep an alert system on your phone so you're up to date with the things in your world. So you can comment on them if you want to. It's a good way to jump on the news cycle. Sometimes they may take you in a direction that you hadn't thought of, but it can be a good direction. And that's something for you to weigh during the interview. Like, they may ask you a question that you didn't anticipate. And quickly you have to decide, is this something that would be good for me to address? And if so, do it. If you think, no, I don't want to go there, that's not helpful to the organization, then use your bridge statements and go back to what you want to say. So you'd say something like, well, that's a good question, but here's what I know. Or, well, here's what I really think, and get back to your own messaging. So you have to be flexible and nimble.
Yes, exactly. Which means, again, preparation, I think.
Right.
Oh, I want to finish up with 2 points. The first is, let's talk about when things go wrong. I realize this session is not so much on disaster planning or crisis communications, but you've done a ton of it.
I
So
have.
give 3 or 4 examples or pointers about how to and how not to react, and then I'll finish up with my last question.
Well, first of all, in crisis, when a crisis occurs, you can't put it off for a day or 2 or 3 to, spend a lot of time really thinking about what you're going to do. You have to be prepared to respond pretty quickly. So it's all hands on deck. It's not like, oh yeah, we'll reconvene at, noon tomorrow. No, it means staying up late at night and figuring out what your game plan is so you can address this thing right away, because sometimes you are able to shut it down, but you have to address it right away. You cannot let it linger, because it will just get worse and worse and worse. So you can't ignore it. You have to address it. And you have to figure out what's the best way to address it. Sometimes it's something where you're just going to have to take your lumps and say, this is an issue, it's come to our attention, and here's what we're doing to address it so it doesn't happen again. Other times maybe it really isn't your fault, and you can give them information as to why not. I think you also have to show that you've learned from it and that you're gonna move forward. You also can't underestimate it and think it's gonna go away, or that certain things aren't gonna come out. I've been working on the Northwestern hazing scandal case, and I'm working for the law firm that is handling the largest amount of cases, basically. And if you'll remember, Northwestern tried to, kind of hide their internal report and put it out on a Friday night, thinking about their firing of their coach, Pat Fitzgerald, because of sexual hazing and other problems in the football program. Well, of course, it didn't go away. And in fact, it's the Medill School of Journalism. They're training the top journalists in the country. So one of the accusers didn't like the way the president handled it. He thought they were just trying to kind of sweep it under the rug. So he went to the Daily Northwestern the next day. They broke the story.
Brilliant job, I will say. Charles Whitaker is on our advisory council. Those
Yes.
journalists killed it.
The Medill students, I was never more proud to be a graduate, because they did kill it. And the whole world followed them. And then, of course, everything came out. Well, not everything, because I know there's a lot more, but a lot came out. And, literally hundreds of players have been coming forward. They haven't all filed lawsuits, but they're coming forward to talk about their experiences. And, it to the president's credit at Northwestern, I think he did pivot when he needed to, because sometimes people are afraid to admit they made a mistake, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. He did pivot, and that helped, but they're still going to have to battle back from this. In my case, I was representing the lawyers, and a lot of the players at first didn't really want to come forward with their name. And I said, we really need some players to come forward, and we'll work with them, and we'll, support them, and, prepare them for the media interviews. But, if you're going to be a whistleblower, it's important to be courageous and speak. And they did. We got 4 great people who are willing to be brave and to come forward. And it's a little bit of a risk, to put people out there who have never been.
More than a risk. And trust me, this goes on in the ballet world, and people
Yes.
are terrified. Let's say
But they did it, and it was effective.
Yeah, extremely effective. Let's say you're a tiny organization and you don't have a media training budget, although I think most people should take at least a little bit of money for it. Can you give 3 or 4 tips about what people can do on their own to get themselves organized, put themselves in the best position until they can afford professional counsel?
Think about what your goals are as an organization and how you can communicate them. Then create maybe 4 or 5 short statements, anywhere from 20 to 30 seconds, that communicate your main thoughts that you want to get out there, your messaging, and make sure they're concise, informative, and engaging, right? Then work on practicing them. Then figure out where you're weak, or where some, negativity could be, and figure out responses to that. So you have to get that messaging down first, then practice, practice, practice. Every TV person you see, you think they're just talking off the top of their head. They're not. They have practiced. And I know you practice before you do your interviews. So practice, read into your cell phone and record yourself so you see how you're coming across. Work with a colleague or a friend, but really practice so you're ready to go. So, okay, you have your messaging, you've practiced it so you can deliver it well. You've seen yourself, you've recorded yourself on the phone so you know where you're strong and where you're not, and tweak that. Dress appropriately, and then you're ready to go to the media with your story. And find reporters that you like, in your local newspaper or on your local TV station who you think are good, who you think might be interested in your story. Seek them out. They are looking for stories. They may take a little while to get back to you, but keep seeking them out, sending them things, and eventually they're gonna pay attention, just as you did, Liza. You did that. You targeted key people, key arts reporters around the country, and you developed relationships with them, and you didn't know most of them before this. So do that, and you can do it on your own. Maybe it moves a little faster with professional help, but if you don't have the budget, you can do it on your own.
Which I think is a really encouraging, helpful message. The last point I think I'd make is don't neglect your board of directors. I think it's really useful to train them as well, and they're very busy. So you really do have to get it down to 3 or 4 talking points. And Kavanagh Media Pros, thank you so much. You've been such an incredible advisor, friend, and help to me. I hope everybody else eventually is able to work with Ann. She's extraordinary. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.